Update. Am I the a-hole for kicking out my mother-in-law in the middle of the night? Original story. Some background. I, 32 male, and my wife, 25 female, have been together for 5 years and married for 3 and are expecting our son right now. We have our ups and downs when we first got together because I was fresh out of a horrible relationship and I was her first boyfriend. But I had always noticed that she was really demeaning about herself and she was always really disappointed in herself. And this was just 6 months into our relationship, and it hurt to see her like that since she's an amazing woman. I convinced her to go to therapy for her, and we would do couple therapy because I did really love her in a short amount of time. And during therapy, I learned that her parents were narcissists who only loved her brother, their golden child. And when she relayed the mistreatment she faced, I honestly cried. And that whole experience made us the strong couple we are today, and the strong woman she is today. Back to present. My mother-in-law and father-in-law have gotten a little better over the years, which is why we are at low contact from our no contact position. My mother-in-law came to visit us. They live overseas, since my wife is pregnant. And it has been only a week and my wife's mood is completely dimmed. This happened at night when we were sleeping. My wife went to get some juice since she was craving it while I went to the washroom, and came back to see glass on the floor and my mother-in-law shouting at my wife. I couldn't handle my anger and shouted at her to get out, and told her if she didn't, I was gonna call the police, so she begrudgingly got out of the house. I calmed my wife down, and she told me mother-in-law had gotten mad at her because she wanted to drink apple juice because it's bad for the baby, and how she doesn't deserve to have a baby if she wanted to kill it. I'm now getting calls from her family saying I'm an a-hole because I kicked her out, and I even got a call from my parents saying it was an a-hole move, and I could have let her stay the night. I understand I might be the a-hole because I kicked her out in the middle of the night, but at that moment, looking at my wife shaking, it was the best option. So Reddit, am I the a-hole? Edit. For people asking me about what kind of apple juice my wife was drinking in the messages, she was drinking natural apple juice, which she makes herself from fresh apples, not the one from the market. And now for the top comments before reading the update. So much not the a-hole. Go back to no contact, unless you want this kind of behavior around your baby. I agree wholeheartedly. OP's in-laws have not proven capable of introspection, so at the very least, it's time for at least absolute minimal contact. Put them on an info diet. Be a grey rock. Establish firmer boundaries now. Not the a-hole. Your in-laws are toxic people. I'm proud of you for protecting your wife from their garbage. They don't deserve a place in your family's life. Thank you. For a second, I did really believe that they were getting better, not being toxic. But that was just a lie, I guess. The only way mother-in-law's behavior that night is only even 10% okay is if your wife was drinking an entire huge bottle of straight whiskey. Apple juice is perfectly fine for an expecting mother. Not the a-hole. It sounds like your mother-in-law really only came over to control your wife and what she does during her pregnancy. If she didn't want to get kicked out, she should have acted like, oh, I don't know, a respectable human being? Not the a-hole. Who says that to a pregnant woman? Over juice? She's lucky you didn't tell her to go screw herself. And now for the update. Thank you to everyone who responded to my post, and thank you to everyone who voted not the a-hole, because I was really conflicted for a few days after the incident. And I also agree that I could have controlled my anger better. A lot has happened since I posted. Me and my wife went to therapy, where she told me the reason she accepted her mother's request to come was because she saw how her mom treated her brother's kids. So she wanted that for our son too, and she really did believe that her mother had changed for the better. But as explained by our therapist, that some narcissists refuse to change. My wife and I have written one letter and sent it to every one of her family member who had told us we were in the wrong, which basically said that her mother never cared for her and never would, and we didn't want that around our children. Then my wife wrote about several instances where she was subjected to emotional abuse, and even though everyone knew, no one did anything except for her grandma, her father's mother. She said she's tired of always being the bigger person, but now she would be selfish for herself and our child. And if anyone disagrees, they're welcome to cut contact, as she wouldn't miss people like that in her life. Something which shocked both of us was when her father called and asked what happened, and she narrated everything. Her father, being the typical narcissist, tried to gaslight, but with my support and her therapy, she put her foot down and asked her father if he had ever cared about her, because it never felt like they did. She narrated every instance from her childhood to her adulthood where she was subjected to emotional abuse, and how her brother always came before her. Her dad was silent throughout the call. And in the end, all my wife said that for her currently, she doesn't have parents, and hung up. By the end, all my wife did was cry, and I cried with her. I also called my parents, asking how they could not take my side knowing the history because they really love my wife, which is why it was hard listening I'm in the wrong. And they told me that it was because her mother had called them in hysterics, and told I was physical with her. I was not. After learning the truth from me, they came over to apologize, and my mother held my wife. I am an only child, so I and my wife are everything to them. I would like to point out that we're in the metropolitan area, and there are plenty of hotels, so I wasn't worried about my mother-in-law finding a hotel. She's loaded. Money isn't an issue. For now, we are just waiting for the little one to be born, and my wife is much happier and free from her toxic family. Great to hear that things are resolving the way they likely should. I hope your parents never side against you like that again. They had no reason to believe mother-in-law's horrible account that their own son was an abuser. That part is the biggest betrayal for me out of all of this, as wife's parents are already known narcissists. Yeah, that concerned me how all it took was one hysterical call, and his parents instantly believed her despite knowing about her and her past. While that response definitely gets a side-eye, it's actually not that uncommon. A lot of people who don't have experience with toxic people have a really vague and inaccurate idea of what that behavior looks like. Even if they understand consciously mother-in-law's an a-hole and has been very horrible in the past, they don't really get how manipulative they can be, or how casually/easily they lie. So the parents receive a phone call in the middle of the night from a hysterical mother-in-law, claiming Opie got physical. Even though they've been warned, they instinctively believe it because they can't wrap their heads around someone who can turn hysterical crying on and off like a tap, or why someone would lie about something that extreme and easily disproved. Hopefully they're quick learners and appropriately apologetic, but it's worth remembering that people like the mother-in-law use those kinds of manipulative tactics because they're super effective at short-circuiting people's logical defenses and getting them on their side. This almost makes me glad I have the experience I do with narcs and their tactics, but I hate that anyone should have to deal with said narcs and tactics in the first place. Good on both of you for sticking to your guns and getting all this out in the open. Narcissists thrive on partial information. By sharing this with everyone in your extended family, it puts the mom in the spotlight where it will be a lot harder to get away with it. Congrats on making it through. I had a mother like that. I left home and went no contact when I was 17. It took me until I was 30 to make that stick. The longing for a loving parent is strong. Between those years, I let my mother back in 3 to 4 times. I couldn't give up on her. The first time, it took about 3 months for me to shut her out again. The last time, it took about an hour. As I got healthier mentally, it was easier to see the inappropriate behavior and shut it down. My mother had some epic meltdowns. So you aren't finished yet. Be vigilant. Be supportive. Don't expect perfection from your wife. She will falter, but expect her to handle things better each time. She will get there. And tell your wife a week is impressive. She snapped out of it faster than most. Now for the next story. Am I the a-hole for kicking my sister out of my home after she told me it was karma that I can't have kids? I, female 32, have been trying to get pregnant for 7 years now and have been unsuccessful. Diagnosed with PCOS later in life, I've had 5 miscarriages that have taken a massive toll on my physical and mental health. It has left me feeling like a massive failure as my partner, male 36, desperately wants children, and I'm unable to give him this. He never makes me feel badly about it, but I know he's upset. His parents are in ill health, and they want grandchildren more than anything. Recently, I had a massive argument with my sister, female 34, after my last miscarriage. I was upset and asking her why this kept happening to me. She shrugged and said it was probably to do with the abortion I had when I was 19. Honestly, I was gobsmacked at how nonchalant she sounded. She knew there had been health reasons behind it, and had been supportive at the time. My health has been so poor that I needed an operation and had spent months recovering. Also, she knows how guilty I felt that I was unable to carry it to full term. I asked her what she had meant. And she said that our decisions always come back to haunt us, and that I needed to understand that I'd brought it on myself. That some people just weren't meant to have children, and it was God's way of telling us to stop. She wasn't being mean, just blunt, but my hormones were all over the place, and I ended up kicking her out of my house and telling her not to contact me again. Soon after, I got loads of phone calls from my other sister, mom and dad, and even my sister's husband, basically saying I had overreacted and was being a a-hole, that I had to make things right and apologized. I refused and haven't spoken to any of them since. My partner doesn't want her back in our house anytime soon after what she said. Am I the a-hole for agreeing with him over my family? Now for the top comments. Not the a-hole. You don't ever say something like that to someone. If she wasn't on the lease or paying rent at all, you have every right to kick her out. She's an adult. She can figure out her own living situation without having to room with people she thinks so lowly of. By the way, I'm so sorry you're having difficulties. I wish you all the best in the future for a large, happy family. If she wasn't on the lease or paying rent at all, you have every right to kick her out. That's the thing. I don't think the sister was even living with Opie at all. The vibe I got from this is that she was merely visiting, especially because sister's husband was also mentioned. All this hullabaloo from the family over making her leave a house she was visiting. I couldn't tell if it meant a roommate or guest situation and didn't want to assume, but her not being on a lease covers both bases. Person on the lease can kick out whoever they want if she's just a guest. Either way, she is a massive and manipulative a-hole who probably told a way different story to the family to act like she didn't say something completely atrocious to warrant getting the boot in the first place. Not an a-hole times 1,000. She is evil and completely lacking empathy towards you. Don't apologize. Don't take anything back and keep her out and anyone who takes her side. Our decisions always come back to haunt us, and that I needed to understand that I'd brought it on myself. That some people just weren't meant to have children. I think Opie needs to tell her family that our decisions always come back to haunt us, and that sister needs to understand that she's brought this on herself. Some people just weren't meant to be allowed in Opie's house. OMG, this is absolutely perfect. What kind of deranged monster is the sister? And she has a damn cheek to bring God into it too, which tells me she is one of those pseudo-Christian a-holes. Well, she may not be allowed to back in Opie's house, but I'm sure she will be welcomed to hell with open arms. Not the a-hole. A miscarriage is not something you should try and guilt a woman about. That's messed up. She was out of line. Last story is titled, Am I the a-hole for not helping my brother get his kids into the same school as my son? My brother, 34 male, and I, 29 female, are not close. We see each other once or twice a year at most, despite living 30 minutes from each other. We both have kids the same age. My older son is the same age as his daughter. So back when my husband and I had our oldest, we talked about where we wanted him to go to school. Option A was the school we were zoned to at the time, and it was okay, but with plenty of people who hated it. Option B was not super popular at the time. It was seen as a less than perfect choice by most for being less bothered with grades, according to several reviews. But for us, it was perfect. They had great teacher reviews from parents of kids going there. Kids adored it, and their policies were ones we really liked. So we made the choice to move to get into the zone for School B. Once our son started school, we had no regrets. Back then, my brother thought we were dumb and talked crap about the school choices. I remember seeing him that Christmas and him saying it was lazy parenting to not consider grades over everything else. Right now, he is eating his words, and is the most we've talked in probably 20 years if I'm being honest. He reached out back in January to say how his kids hated school, and how he and his wife were having a hard time with teachers and things like that. He mentioned trying to get the kids into the same school my son was going to. There was a layer of aggression in everything. Like, screw you for having it better. He started texting and telling me this stuff a lot. And then in April, he told me that he got rejected because of the district, and ranted a bit about how much we sucked, etc., to the point where I hung up on him. It was after that point he asked me if he could use my address to enroll the kids there. I told him I would need to think about it. My husband and I discussed it, and we said no. Our reasons were neither of us wanted to deal with seeing and hearing more from him, because while everything is emailed, we also get regular snail mail for certain things too throughout the year, and that would require more contact than neither of us wanted with him. I told him it wouldn't work for us, and when he asked why, I told him we have never been good, and we don't need to keep the conflict up by staying in touch more. My brother is pissed and has been pissed for months. I had to block him on WhatsApp, where he was texting and calling me, and I ended up leaving our family group chats because he was airing his stuff there. He called me an a-hole, said I was selfish, that I should put the kids first. And at first, everyone was more on my side, but now others seem to think it wouldn't hurt and that putting the kids first should be the priority of a non-a-hole. So now I ask, am I the a-hole? Not an a-hole. Depending where you are, it's a crime to say you live at a place so you can enroll your kids in a better school. Even if it was legal, you don't owe him anything. Opie, not only it is illegal, but your kid is registered in that school at that address. It seems pretty inevitable that the school will eventually put two and two together, and then you'll be open to possible prosecution. Possibly your kid being kicked out of the school. That's what I'd tell him and family. Not the a-hole. I was thinking this as I wrote my comment above. Given the OP is a woman and her kids might have a different last name than her brother's kids, they would almost undoubtedly question why two sets of kids with different last names reside at the same address. Not the a-hole. It's true that kids should be primarily the concern for parents and family, but your brother and his condescending and horrible behavior is the roadblock here, not you and your decision to limit contact with him. Also, if this is public school in the US, this may be residency fraud. I don't know what penalties might be for parties involved, but it's a risk that you really shouldn't have to take. Your brother's kids have options besides making you commit fraud. He can find another school or he could move into another district. Could also be less of an a-hole and work on being a caring and supportive family member. There was a residency fraud case locally a while back, and the parents ended up on the hook for the cost of schooling. I can't remember the exact number, but it was thousands of dollars.